Well, let's call the meeting to order. We are going to launch into our first agenda item, which is the review of minutes from August 11th, 2021. Let's start there. Has everyone had a chance to look at those minutes and review them to see if there's any proposed changes or shifts that need to be shared with Mary?
There's one section in yellow, and that is, I had sent them out to everyone, and then I got some feedback from people. So I did make 2 changes, and that's why it's in yellow.
Yeah, I sent something to you, Mary, that Andrew McMahon is a consultant, so he's not a volunteer anymore. I think that was one thing I sent to you. He's paid.
Okay, that's on the executive. Are we on the executive?
Okay, you're right.
No,
Okay.
we're not yet there.
Okay, never mind
We're
that.
just on the regular meeting minutes right now. Okay, if everyone had the chance to review and there are no amendments proposed, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Michael.
Second.
Thank you, Kip. That's a second. All in favor of approving the minutes for August 12th, 2021?
I think it's August 11th.
Sorry. Yes, August 11th, 2021.
Yes.
Okay. It's unanimous. Awesome. The other part of the first agenda item said review of the March 24th, 2021 minutes, but I realized afterwards they were not sent out to you in time. So I'm going to ask that we table that. So I'll make a motion to table the March 24th, 2021 minutes until the next meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Kip. And then all in favor?
Aye.
We do have to vote to table, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think one time I tried to table without doing it.
Meg, no debate, but during a motion to table.
Oh, you do have to open to debate?
No, there's no debate on a motion to table. You just vote up or down.
Perfect. All right.
So that's you're tabling the minutes from what meeting again?
March 24th, 2021.
Okay. Meg, do you want me to just look at the video and do them? They won't
No,
be as
they're-
good as yours, but
Yeah, the March 24th ones are done. I just didn't get them out in time. I thought that I had sent them to Amy and I hadn't. So I
okay.
didn't get out to all of you.
Okay.
Thank you for offering that.
I'm a little confused. Aren't the March 24th ones the executive minutes that you're tabling?
No, that's a different piece. And that's in the next agenda item.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. So the updates from the chair. Amy and I, yes, sorry, Kip.
What about the executive session minutes?
So I have that underneath the next section, updates from the chair, when we review the executive mission minutes and the issue of a pay raise for our staffer. I also want to talk about the meeting that we had with Mayor Murphy and the CPA press release.
Okay, sorry, my apologies.
No worries. Okay, so we had a meeting, Amy and I, with Mayor Murphy a few weeks ago. He had done his due diligence really wonderfully to reach out and ask if department heads and other folks wanted to meet, to check in and offer his support. And a few of the things that we highlighted were, for example, that we'd had a lot of changes in the legal department. We were anxious to figure out who we would be working with and looking for updates on the hiring of the new hires into the legal department. So that's how we found out we were going to start being able to work with Kathleen Degnan, who is here with us today. And she's on the agenda later to share what she's been doing, which is wonderful. So that feels really good. And we also spoke about the survey, which we had talked about in the last meeting, and asked for his support in getting the survey on the website and for Spanish translation, really wanting it to be both English and Spanish. So he really supported us with that. And he suggested that we do a CPA press release and then put out the survey within that structure. So Amy wrote a really nice press release, which she shared with the mayor's office, and then they put a blast out. We'll see what happens with that in terms of if anyone picks it up or where that ends up going. They also did post the survey to the website. Amy, the Spanish translation, I know Milka was working on. Do you know if that was ever posted to the website?
I was just thinking that, and I can check right now as we're talking. I'll look.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't know offhand. I know it wasn't up yesterday, but I did get in touch with Jeffrey, who said they would put it up.
Do you know the top of your head right now, Amy, about how many responses you've gotten so far?
I know that it's at least 27.
Okay.
So I wish it were more, but that's still something.
Well, that's only after a few days. So I think one thing too, Amy, has that link been shared out to the email list for all of us? The survey link in terms of being able to share it with others?
I think I sent that to you all. I know I shared it out on social media, but I can make a note to send it out if I didn't already.
Yeah, that would be great. Even if you just did a quick blast after this meeting,
Sure.
so that folks can each try to send it to the circles that they also move in, whether that's, sharing it with the Conservation Commission list or sharing that with somebody else that would probably be willing to complete the survey, and getting as much feedback as possible is a good thing.
Yeah. I think I did send it to people and say, please spread this far and wide. Oh, and I do see that the Spanish survey is on the website. So that's great.
Good news. Okay. So if you could share that out, and even if we can also get the Spanish language translation one, that'd be good too. And then we can start sharing that out personally, just, from members of our committee to our circles. And then at the next meeting, we'll make sure that we put aside some time to be able to look at the responses and figure out what do we think about those responses that we've received. Okay. The next piece I wanted to check in around is the executive session. So we had an executive session on August 16th of 2021. This came out of me talking to Amy Landau around the possibility of her having a raise and what that process would look like. In terms of open meeting law, I reached out to the AG's office, the state level, and asked what's the process by which we negotiate a raise for a staffer. And the suggestion was that it was best done in executive session, and that the minutes would then be shared out afterwards and then discussed and brought in a more final form in full committee for a vote. The process, I contacted the Human Resources Department. The process is that we negotiate with the staffer. We have an executive session meeting. We then bring that to the staffer, hear their thinking on that, and then bring it to full session. And then if it is approved by this full committee by vote, we then contact Todd McGee around the process by which it moves through approval through City Council. And then there is a form, I think it's called the PAF, which is a very simple form that just allows us to put in what the pay raise is, for what purpose, at what point does it go into effect, and then we submit that to HR. So it's a very simple process. And when Mary and Michael and I met as officers, as the secretary and the vice chair and the chair, we decided, and Michael Fassetti made a motion to offer the CPAC administrator a $5 an hour increase from $25 to $30 an hour as of a retroactive as of July 1st. And this would go forward for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, the rate would be reevaluated. This was seconded by Mary Moriarty, and then it was voted on unanimously. Now, the other piece to know around that is that when we reached out to Andrew McCon, who's been doing budgetary work for our committee, he said that effectively our projected fiscal year 2022 budget is $36,000 or $36,994,000, and that with a raise up to $30 an hour, that would equate to a $2,887 annual raise. And that would mean that Amy's salary shifts from 14,062 to 16,950, which is well within the scope of a projected administrative budget of $36,994. All right. Any questions about the process or about any of that? And then we will be making that motion here and then having a discussion and debate. Maybe we should do that first, make the motion and then open it up for debate. Kip, you have a question?
Well, I have a question first on the process. So,
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, why all the members were not invited to an executive session, and whether you actually had a quorum and were able to. So that's what's just. I mean, my understanding
Yeah. So from the Attorney General's office, I think it's the Office of Government Transparency and Accountability. When I spoke with them on the phone, they said that negotiation in general should occur in executive session of only the executive members, of which we have 3 currently. We have the secretary, the vice chair, and the chair, and all 3 were present. And that the goal would be for negotiations to occur in that setting, and that then the recommendations of that executive session would then be brought to a full committee meeting for then a motion and a debate to occur here and a vote.
And this debate and discussion shouldn't be taking place in an executive session?
So it was the suggestion of the AG's office that what we should do is have that discussion within executive session, which is only a meeting of the 3 at this point, the 3 members, right? The executive session, the executive committee.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding the term executive session and what took place. So we have counsel. Does this make sense to you?
Well, I understand that Meg has called the AG's office and, she's relaying what was told to her. I'm not really sure how this all began normally, and I'm talking city council. This is a subcommittee of, so it's not a subcommittee, but what you normally do is you say, we're moving into executive session, and you have to say that, you have to get a second, you go into executive session, you say what it's about, you don't discuss it, and then you go in executive session, make the discussion, and then you go back on the record saying we're opening back up. But what Meg was told was that, you just need the 3, the executive members, and that was done. I'm not sure. Meg, just a question. When did that discussion happen? When you moved into executive session? I mean, did that happen the last time, that meeting you were talking about on August? What was it? August 12th? Okay. Did you move into executive?
August 16th.
August 16th. Did you move into executive session then, or was it just not discussed?
So my understanding from my conversation is that executive session in this kind of committee meant having a meeting that was only the members who were the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. And if there had been a treasurer, then the treasurer.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And like I said, I was talking from a different context. So the AG's office told you that. I'm not going to, say anything about the advice that you gotten, because they're good resource. So, I'm not gonna challenge what the AG said to you. So, now, right now, we're not in executive session. So I take it you want to make a motion to discuss what happened, because now, executive session, those minutes, that discussion doesn't stay in executive session forever. Open up in that public records law and open meeting law, they would become public. And I think that's what you're trying to do right now. You had the negotiation, now you're going to discuss it in front of the full committee, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then I think you can do that.
But as a member of the committee, I was totally unaware that there was an executive session taking place. And, and I don't have our rules in front of us, but, don't believe our rules as a committee allow or provide for like a meeting of just the officers. A meeting of the CPA requires a quorum of the full members, and as a member who's going to be expected to vote up or down about something that took place in a meeting, which I had no ability to participate in.
Well, you can do that now. I
Yeah.
think that's what Megan, you can do that now.
I can discuss.
Yeah, because Megan's already set forth, what was discussed. So now it's time for this committee you can open up the discussion now, because lots of times when you're talking about staff and raises and things like that, you do that in executive session. But now that, you've got something to talk about and Meg has already brought it open. I mean, we're not in executive session now,
Right.
so you can talk about it.
We can discuss personnel matters and an open.
We're not talking about disciplinary action,
No, right.
right? That's something you definitely, and the person would have right to counsel and all that stuff. We're talking about a raise.
Well, but isn't that like a performance-based kind of discussion?
Well, is that what your concern is? That if it's not the salary you're talking about, you want to discuss performance?
Well, I think they're related. I mean, I think they're related. I don't think it's a cost of living rate.
Okay.
Kip,
So
can I hear your
That's
suggestion?
what I'm confused by, just like it seems.
Well,
And
here's
I'm
something
opposed
you
to
can
it.
do.
I want to make sure we didn't violate public meeting laws and that we're not discussing personnel matters in
Well,
a regular public meeting.
what you can do now, if you want, is because you want to discuss that, go into executive session right now and have the discussion that you want. Although it's a little strange because right now we're on media,
Right.
that's the thing. It used to be executive session. That's another problem. Now we have Zoom.
Right.
And going to executive session, it's not like we can shut everything down. Normally you just go in executive session, you go into a room, you talk, and then you come back out. We can't do this here.
So Kip, given what's happening right now with the process being virtual, this is what I was told to do by the AG's office. So what can happen
Makes
now
sense.
is we can have a motion and then we can have a discussion and then we can vote that motion up or down, right? Based on what happened in that executive session. And if Kip, if you want me to follow up, if you want me to call the AG's office again, I'm more than happy to, if you want me to clarify. Okay.
Not necessary.
It does present problems, Kip. I mean, I understand. After I just said that, I realized that, yeah, it's something we never had to deal with before. So,
It's-
but, and if you want, I mean, I can, Meg and I can have a conference call if that helps.
My only concern is that, is making sure we're complying with the
I
public
understand.
laws. And I understand we're in a whole different world, and it seems like, in the term, I think, executive session, it means one thing to me, and I think it's been used a little bit differently here than what I understood. But again, we're in a COVID world, and it may be this is what we're just trying to get the best we can. I don't want to beat
You're
this
right.
more than is
No.
necessary, but I do want to be careful.
I understand. And, if you want to be in on this conference call, I mean, I suppose you could do that, but I'm not sure that you want to have everyone on this committee in a conference call type of thing.
Which we actually can't do because of
Exactly.
law.
Exactly. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Okay.
And that's why, I think that's why the AG said what they said.
So I'd like to have a motion and then a discussion. So I'll make a motion I want to make sure the language is right. To bring Amy Lendell's hourly rate from $25 to $30 an hour, retroactive to July 1st, 2021, and going forward for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, the rate will be evaluated.
Okay, I will make that motion.
Thank you, Mimi. Do I have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Mike. Open for discussion.
And just at the top of it, I want to thank the subcommittee for doing this work. It is always difficult, and as we've just been talking about, we are in complicated times, but you did it. I'm grateful for your work, and I trust all of your judgment a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Is there anyone else that wants to speak?
So I'm tempted to make a motion to table till we get some clarity on executive session and whether the full committee should be participating in these conversations or not. So I'll make the motion. If anybody seconds it, great. Otherwise, we'll go on with a vote. So I'll make a motion to table.
I'm not hearing a second, Kip. Is there a second?
That's fine.
I don't think there's a second. I wanted to state that the reason why we came to the $30 an hour was in a bit of research to figure out what are comparable salaries and hourly rates of CPC administrators in other communities. And the range was between 25 and 35. Amy started at 25. She's now been in this role for 3 years. Yes, Amy? And I felt strongly that the amount of experience Amy has now versus did when we first hired her is greatly shifted in terms of the amount of institutional knowledge that she's holding on to, in terms of the processes that she has learned and the relationship she's established with other CPCs. I feel like she's done really great work for our committee, and I feel like it made sense to honor that with a raise, right? We also know, right, when I called the HR department and my first question was, is there a process by which we give someone a raise? Is there a timetable somewhere that says, as of X number of years, you get this bump? Like, how much of a raise do people receive? And the response I got was, well, there's in fact no clear guidance. There's no timetable. There's no percentage or precedent around how a committee would choose to give a staffer a raise. She said, well, really, it's all about comparative rates. Like, what are they paid in surrounding communities? And I shared that. And she said, well, we all sort of know what's been happening in Holyoke recently around how hard it's been for us to hold on to staff. Part of that is because we are not paying as well as other surrounding communities. So if you can pay out of your budget and it won't negatively affect you, do it. It was sort of the response that I got from HR when I had that conversation with them. So that was also kind of an underlying factor of something that I brought to the executive session meeting, was that conversation that I had with HR. Is there anyone else that wants to speak? Okay, well, let's take a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Aye. So that's 4. Kip, are you a nay?
Correct. It's on the process.
I respect that. So that's 4 yeas, 1 nay, being Kip Foley. Okay, thank you, folks. This woman picking up my compost, saying hello. All right, thank you, folks. All right, so we are now going to move to agenda item 3, which is updates from the city solicitor office. We are super excited to have attorney Kathy Degnan here, so she can share the yeoman's work that she has been doing to jig us out from where we were and help us move forward with contracts.
Oh, thank you, Meg. Yes, and I want to thank Amy and Mimi. I've had discussions with you, and Amy was nice enough to give me a list, which helps focus things for me in terms of priority, and it's a very good list. And I'm starting to work through it. And I can tell you that the MIFA contract, it was, as you know, City Council agreed to give the extension on this project, and I did review it, made some changes, and talked about it with Amy and Mimi to make sure that I'd covered all of the issues, and it was agreed that we had. So I sent it to council, and that was just yesterday, as I told Mimi. So, but I was hoping to have discussion with council, and I was not able. I did not. So that's the first thing I'm going to try and initiate a call tomorrow to see if I can find out. And I think you all know what the issues were there. I mean, there's a funding deadline, and there was nothing that I saw in the file outside of what was given to me, and the fact that the funding deadline had been pushed back, and I just made some changes, and I think we're good with that. So the idea is council going to say, yes, we can go through with it? And that's a question, or whether or not they'd like to hit the reset button, as it were, and file again. So those are things to consider. So I just wanted to let you know that the amendment expanding the funding deadline did happen, and it has been sent to their council. So I merely have to, hopefully I will get a call back. If not, I will make the phone call. But that's where that stands right now. I'm jumping a little bit, Amy, from your list, because I was working on Jackson Street, the affordable housing, which from what I understand, that's a very big deal. I don't think we've done an affordable housing restriction in the community preservation context. And I looked through, Amy was nice enough to send me the applications for various projects, and that was one of them. So I spent time looking through the project to see, because there are various forms of restrictions, affordable housing restrictions. And one of them depends on, is this going to be a situation where the community funds, CPA funds, are being used to build the structure and then lease it out? That happens all the time. Or is this a situation where, and that's what's happening here. I read between the Holyoke Housing Authority and the Habitat for Humanity, it's HHH property that we're talking about on the corner of Chestnut and Jackson. So it's HHH's property, and Habitat's going to help them construct, and there are going to be 2 units, and they're going to be bought, they're going to be sold. Okay. And so I know after I've discovered that, I think Mimi and Amy, we talked about this, and I do believe that a deed rider was sent from HHA's attorney. I left a message with him this afternoon. It's my hope that I'll be talking to him tomorrow as well, because it's a different form if it's a rental. Okay, if that's what we're talking about. But if it's not, if HHA is going to sell the property, then you take the deed rider, attach it to the deed, and both would be recorded at the same time. So when I first talked to Amy and Mimi, I didn't think that was going to be the case. But once I read through the application, I found out, yeah, that's the way this is happening. So in this situation, it would be a deed rider type of preservation restriction. Like I said, that would be different. And I know we have different affordable housing restrictions to talk about. I don't know if any one of them has to do with the rental situation that I described, or whether they're all simply, we're constructing these, we're
They're
selling
all
them,
homeowner housing. So
all of them like that. Yeah, because like I said, it's rental or own, and here it's own. So the deed
Other than
rider,
the Wayfarers project was the only one that was a rental property.
that's different. Okay, then that would be a different restriction altogether. They both would have to be recorded, but the deed rider is specific in that you attach it right to the deed. So I am working on that. I found something that we can use, and I need to talk to HHA's attorney. I think that, I haven't talked to him. I don't know if you folks have ever had communications with him before. Probably not, but let me know if you have. I just think that that's something that once I get on the phone with him, it should be okay. Unless there are special restrictions, special things that I don't know about. And Amy, you're raising your hand?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention that Amy Giroux is here from Habitat for Humanity, and she's one of the grant recipients. So I'm just letting you know, and you know, if she,
Thank you.
if you, I don't know, if Meg, if you think it's appropriate for her to say anything, it's up to you.
Amy, Drew, is there anything that you would like to share at this point?
Yeah, I mean, whoops, sorry, my computer's being weird. Doing the deed riders is nothing new for us with that. That's our process for pretty much every house we build to lock in the affordability part of it when you're doing that. And so we've done them with other departments within the city before when we've used home funds and CBGB funds and things like that.
Yes.
And we've done them with other projects with the Housing Authority. So in actuality, while the lot is owned by by the Housing Authority, it's in a land trust between the two of us. And then at the time when everything is constructed, it's all simultaneously passed on to the homeowner at the time of purchase.
Thank you, Amy. That land trust, that's an interesting fact because it may have to be listed in the deed rider. Is that something that's recorded in the registry of deeds?
It's basically, it's an agreement between us and how we're going to develop it on behalf of the Housing Authority. So it's like, it's our contract with them that we're going to be doing this for them.
Is there any issues why, could I see it or would that be a
Yeah, I
problem?
can send it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's something we did when we built the houses across the street with them as well.
Yeah,
Just
and you're
because
right.
it protects both of us since, they own the property, but we're doing the construction. So it kind of holds us to making sure we complete the construction, but it also,
Right.
we don't really want to be building a house on land that we don't own without having contracted there.
Yes, and I know what you mean about CDBG funds, those community development, you see
Yeah.
a lot of restrictions in that context. So
Yeah.
that would be, I would appreciate that, Amy. Thank you for Amy, thank you for pointing out that Amy was here. And Amy, thanks for your input.
No problem.
So I think once we get going, Jackson Street's gonna be the first one I do, and then I'll start kicking in other ones. Since it's just wayfinders, it's different. I'll use it as a template. Obviously, I'll have to tweak it depending on the project, but at least we'll have something to work from. So I thought that was an important thing to discuss. I'll say, I know that Amy and Meg know about this, and maybe Mimi, we have gotten some contracts through. I'm waiting for a signature on the JFK Memorial. The War Memorial, that one has been signed. And I think there's one other one. There's like 3 that, so we're plowing through it. We'll get those grant agreements. I will plan on getting those grant agreements through.
I think
And-
Field only needs the mayor's signature, and then Pulaski Park just needs mine. And I've made a plan to
Yes.
meet with Kathy
Yes.
tomorrow to sign that.
Well, there's one, I think the JFK, I should pull it out. I brought everything here. Needs Terry Shepherd's signature.
Yeah, that's the one she mentioned that, I think, oh, maybe you didn't, the JFK monument, yeah.
JFK, yeah, that's the one. So it's
We
got
said
all,
that like the War Memorial is fully executed.
Yep.
And the JFK Monument contract, Mayor Field and Pulaski Park are like a hairbreadth away from having the signatures they need to be fully executed. And
yes.
then it's really only the MIFA amendment that you're waiting for council on.
Yep.
And then the Jackson Street first time home buyer affordable home restriction you're working on.
Yep.
And then the Wayfarers contract.
Yes. And,
Yeah,
and
the only
Wayfinders
piece
and
that's-
Scott Tower, but those
And
can
Scott
come
Tower.
later, yeah.
Okay.
and you're right, the Mayfair, that's the one, the mayor's signature. But so you mentioned them all. So thank you very much for doing that. You see, I apologize if I could just take a look at this and see. 'Cause that was a big one. Wayfinders, yep, Mayfield, yep. Scott Tower, I have not looked at, but I am seeing your list, Amy. So you need a clarification on completion date? Okay.
Yeah, and actually, we have representatives from the Scott Tower project here. That's also listed on the agenda for later, but
Oh.
Yoni is here from the city, and Mark Walmsley from Kestrel, just so that you're aware.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I pulled all these files. The I hope I say this right.
Wistariahurst.
Yeah. I'm a fud when
yeah.
I say that.
And we have the new director there, here as well from that.
Okay.
Okay.
So next on the agenda, we have CPC members sharing external board priorities. And I wonder if we should take agenda item 5 and 6 first before we do that, since we have so many visitors here and they're here ready to share. So I'd like to move to agenda item 5, updates on fiscal year 21 projects and contract processes, and that would move us to Scott's Tower Anniversary Hill.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Thank you. Okay, so Scott's Tower Anniversary Hill, I know that there was an issue with the contract being drafted and also an issue with the deadlines. Mary, do you want to speak to that, or Yanni, who wants to speak to that?
I think,
Yoni.
yeah, I think I
Yeah.
prefer to have, can you hear me? I
Mhm.
think I prefer to have Yoni speak to that. Yeah, it seemed to me that there was, some conflict. It needed to occur a little bit more rapidly than it was happening. So Yoni, why don't you explain?
Yeah, I'll do my best, and maybe Mark Walmsley can chime in if I miss something. Pastoral is our partner on this project. So the bulk of the CPA award was for acquisition of 14.1 acres north of Scott Tower Anniversary Hill Park. Kestrel is holding on to that land, and the city will formally buy it from them. And also $25,000 for some of the preliminary park design. We hope to come back for future funding rounds for design and construction of restored, revitalized park. The other 50% of the acquisition costs are supposed to still come from the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant that we applied for last February. We still think it's going to go through. The signs are good, but it's awaiting still final approval from National Park Service. This is the stateside portion of the federal funds. So DCS, the state agency, has already recommended it to be awarded, but we're still waiting for National Park Service. So we're trying to figure out in the contract, which I understand we're still waiting to sign, figure out if we need language that allows for a 6-month extension or some time period so that we can hopefully still move forward with the project. At the same time, we have already worked with Amy to find a way that we could start the preliminary site design work, the 25,000. So Amy was able to create a purchase order so that the city could sign a contract with the firm that we're working with, GCA. But our understanding is we can't actually make payments on any invoices they issue until we have the full contract in place, which covers the acquisition and the design. So it's okay for now, but we would like to see a contract get signed in the near future to avoid any conflicts on that end. So I think that's where we're at.
Yes, Amy, you wanted to weigh in?
Also, I think Yoni and Mark, we discussed the fact that you think that you would need 6 months more for the deadline, or to move the deadline for the contract from December 2021 to June 30th, 2022. And since the contract isn't yet drafted, there's an opportunity to do that. And I also checked the details sent to City Council, and we're not locked in to any specific deadline. There were no specifics about that.
Okay, well, that would seem to, indicate that it would be really easy for us to do that as long as the committee was willing to vote on it, because we initially voted on contract terms, even if we didn't then send out that contract term by language to this city council, we still voted on it here. So that would still mean that we would need to vote for that extension in our committee.
So I guess I just don't know if it's more that you, Yoni, want the possibility of the 6 months, or to have it put in a, Probably it might be good to say 6 or put that on the table since we don't know when the contract will be finalized rather than putting a specific date. I don't know. You can share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that works for us. Do you have an estimated date when the contract would be finalized?
I think what Amy suggests is a good idea, the 6 months, because I would not want to say something right now and then have it be a problem later. So I'll do the best that I can, but I don't have a deadline, a date for you. So I think Amy's suggestion makes sense.
Okay, so we're talking about making a motion to extend the deadline by 6 months on this project. Is that correct, Amy?
I'm a little confused myself. Yoni, is it the deadline to receive the full funding? Oh yeah, now I'm remembering. Okay, so I think the issue was that the committee did agree to the extension, but the problem was it was the same date as the acquisition, or we didn't know if that was a problem. Do you remember that conversation, Mark and Yoni? And Mark, you said it's probably okay that it could still happen on December 2021, or I don't know. I might be getting confused.
Guys, is this the starting gate, getting out of the starting gate? Is that based on the approval of the full funding of your application? Is that what you're basing? Is that the starting time that you want to have? If and when the full funding comes and you can cut a purchase order? Is that what you want?
I think it's more that they want to start using the preliminary funding now.
But
Yoni, so that you can do the preliminary design work even prior to the NPS grant coming through, the Land and Water Conservation Grant coming through.
Yeah,
Madam Chairman, no, I understand that, but I thought I had heard that the purchasing department would not cut anything unless the full funding amount was awarded to you. Is that correct?
From a purchasing perspective, you need to have a contract. You got the PO, the blanket PO, but before anything will be cut, you have to have a contract. So I understand how important
Right.
that document is.
Right. Yeah, we have a.
Mary has her hand up. Mary?
I saw a preliminary contract, and it said on the preliminary contract that none of the money would be allowed until all of the money was okayed. And that's not what was originally understood. So I think that's where the whole thing got very confusing and got set back. Does anyone else recall that, seeing that piece on the contract? There was a preliminary write-up of the contract.
Yeah, you're right. I have some more notes here that Scott Tower has the same date for obtaining the full funding, what we call the drop dead deadline, as the completion of the acquisition, which was December 21st, 2021. So this was when Jenna was still the attorney. She said for the city, she said, does this make sense? That it's the same deadline. That's what I'm referring to. So that's what we're trying to find out now. And Mark, in your last email, Mark Walmsley, you said that it could happen. The completion of the acquisition could still happen then. Oh, on the same deadline.
But I don't believe that was the understanding when the application went through. In other words, I think that it was applied for asking that the money cover the things that Yoni just described. And then this preliminary contract came through with that added piece in it, which changes all the deadlines. And so now they need this extension because it's too difficult to predict when everything will be in place.
All right, Mary, what does this project need?
I think
I
Mark
think
also
the-
has some, okay, sorry.
Well, go ahead. If Mark and Yoni, if I'm incorrect on that, go ahead. But that's the way I understood the problem. That they had applied for one thing. When the contract came through, it said something slightly different. And it threw off all their timelines. And it threw off the business of opening the money for the contractor that they have, or the consultant they have for the design. So is that how you recall?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I actually haven't seen, I don't believe, a draft of the contract.
There's
So
no contract.
there were two things that kind of, well, honestly, the major thing that threw us off is that we didn't realize, we haven't worked with this grant before, the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We didn't realize there was a second review, level of review with the federal government and how long that was going to take. We basically were told months ago that the state loved the project and was going to recommend it, and that they've never had a project that they recommended turned down to the federal government. So we're just all waiting. So it is taking longer than we thought. We had originally put the December date on there because we took out a bridge loan to pre-acquire this property. And basically the bridge loan is good until December. We can extend that, certainly if we need to. We will start paying interest on it if we do, but we're ready to do that. So that was kind of where we set the December, the bridge loan program was for a year. So that's what we have it for. The complication really came, I think, about, from my understanding, the fact that there was two parts to this CPA expenditure, one for the acquisition and one to pay for some of these initial design costs, which honestly was turning out, I mean, it's an incredible opportunity because usually that money isn't there, and it's absolutely critical to have to apply for the next round of grants for this project. So having that $25,000 is, is really key. And then I could just add on top of it, this is just, every municipality is different. Although we've done many, many, many CPA projects, I think it's the fact that this has both two of the two funding pieces to it, as well as just, again, municipalities are different. We haven't actually had to sign a contract with the municipality for the CPA funds, other than if it was for land, a purchase and sale agreement. If we were taking a CPA or a CR on it in a CPA project, conservation restriction, we actually haven't, no one's ever requested a contract from us before. So we're kind of trying to roll with what this means. And I think the immediate worry is, again, getting GZA paid, if they send us a bill. And the complication, I think, there is that obviously, I think we worked it with the agreement you just came up with, but the money for the design work isn't coming to Kestrel. Basically, only the money for the acquisition is coming to Kestrel. That the money for the design work is going straight from the city to GZA. So there was some confusion. Well, does that have to be part of a contract with Kestrel? If it's so, it sounds like everyone's been working that out, but we just need to figure out what we need now. So basically, again, it's primarily, this delay in hearing from the federal government that kind of is pushing us, making us think we should move this beyond that December deadline that we originally set, just so we make sure we have time to close. As soon as we hear from them, we'll sign a contract with the state for that grant money as soon as we can, and we can set up the closing. All the due diligence, maybe except for, well, no, that's all the due diligence is done on our behalf. It would be the city doing due diligence once we kind of get that once we get the contract signed, but otherwise we're ready to move fairly quickly as soon as we hear from the state and sign that contract with them. Or actually it would be Holyoke signing the contract with them because you're the applicant, sorry.
Right.
It seems to me, though, that the only thing that this committee needs to vote on is the change of the term from the from the December deadline to a June 30th deadline. Everything else seems like a detail that can be handled with the city solicitor's office because it wasn't directly voted on.
I think that's probably correct.
Yeah, it is correct.
If it's imperative to get the contract signed as soon as possible, I think that would be the one tweak that we'd look for.
Would this be a deadline for everything, both full funding and acquisition?
Well, we're going to need full funding, for the acquisition. I should say that was the one kind of wiggle room. Again, we had to apply for this grant with the city fairly quickly, or CPA funding and the LWCF grant fairly quickly. I know from Kestrel's perspective, we wanted to leave open the possibility of, you know, what to do if we didn't get the LWCF grant, if the city didn't get it, and negotiating another agreement with the city to still sell the land to the city, maybe at a reduced rate. So I think that's why we want to leave a little bit of wiggle room in terms of that full funding kind of possibility when we originally discussed this. But I believe, yeah, I think full funding will need to come through, at least. I think that was kind of what expected, and that's the ideal, that full funding will be on the table by the time we close, and it will just all be taken care of at once.
Amy, what's the current, it's a December what deadline? What's the date?
I think the current, the funding deadline, I think, was December 21st, 2021, and that was also the deadline for the acquisition.
So I'd like to make a motion that we're shifting from that deadline to a June 30th, 2022 deadline.
I will second that motion.
All right. Any further debate or discussion?
Just one quick question. Those were the dates that were proposed in the application, correct? December.
The December dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm ready to support a 6-month extension.
And I just want to mention that it is an open question about whether or not this does require a contract. And because I know that with the Glowtech acquisition, there was not one. That was before Kathy, you came on. And I'm not exactly sure why the city solicitor office decided that, but because there were different people there, but that is possible there. I don't know if a contract is required.
Well, the only reason I mention it, I know from, because you got in the notes here that you talked to Lori, from a procurement standpoint, you know, they need the contract. So I can say from a procurement standpoint, we have to have that.
It may also be the added complication of there being the preliminary money that's going really to a design firm as well as the acquisition. It's a more complicated project than the initial Kestrel project was. What was that, 1 cycle ago or 2 cycles ago?
Okay, but just to be clear, is the committee now voting on 6 months from the, so it will be June 30th. That is going to be 2022. Okay, just wanted to know.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
so that's unanimous. All right, thank you. Kathy will be in touch and we'll make sure that we stay, we'll keep you in the loop in terms of figuring out what this contract looks like. And we'll get it out to you as soon as we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Okay, so that means the next piece on the agenda is any other updates on fiscal year 21 projects. So Amy, do you want to give an update on the fire truck project?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, the committee had decided to extend that to 3 years. And so basically that's something that Kathy, you know, I know that a draft was done, but just, or actually, I don't know if the draft was done with a 3-year extension. So that's something that is on Kathy's list. And
That's it.
Okay.
and then do you want me to go on to other ones?
Yeah, let's go to Wayfinders next.
Yeah, so Wayfinders, we now have a new Lee Dara has left. And there's somebody new named James. Actually, now I don't have his name in front of me.
Yeah.
Do you remember his last name?
No, but I know he goes by Jim.
I don't have it in front of me, but he just emailed me today and he's now taken over her position. So he just kind of wanted confirmation that there was that extension given. And I told him that it was, and that, but a draft has been started but needs to be completed. Again, that's something Kathy and I will work on. And one of the questions I had about that when I was, when Jenna was back in the position was, since they're getting that 6 months and yet the contract hasn't been drafted yet, would there still be a possibility for the 6-month extension that you normally include in contracts for the construction? And I don't know. I know, Meg, you didn't think so, but just mentioning that.
Say that one more time, Amy.
What?
Say that one more time, Amy.
Okay, normally in the contracts, you know how you say, okay, there's the possibility of a 6-month extension or 3-month extension that the grant recipient can request.
Yep.
So in this case, I'm asking you, do you think that the Wayfinders contract should include that, which it hasn't yet been drafted, given that you are already giving them more time, you already granted them 6 months for the full funding requirement. Do you also want to at least put in a possibility? It might be a good idea because, as we know, construction is kind of unpredictable, and sometimes things can happen out of the, out of the project's control. So,
And I think that's sort of become a standard in all of the contracts that we've been moving forward, especially as we've learned more than ever that things just take longer than we think, and
Yeah.
complications arise to prevent things from moving forward. So that my expectation is that every contract at this point is building that in. Is that different from anyone else's understanding? Is everyone on board for that being a precedent, that every contract has that?
Well, it's probably have to take it on a case-by-case basis, depending upon the nature of the application and the goal and what's required. So well, Madam Chairman, I think we should, in my opinion, we should just go one contract at a time. We're living in a very difficult time where it's hard to predict funding. It's hard to predict getting a message from Washington, and it's hard to predict labor and material. So I wish we could do it, but I'm not so sure it's wise as we speak at the present moment. And just go on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, you can still say no, but it just allows for the possibility for them to make that request if the committee agrees. So,
without us having to go back to the city council.
Yeah.
Is this something we have to vote on?
Are you asking me?
Like, is it the will of the committee that we have a motion and vote on this, or is it something that we can just?
I don't think it much matters.
Okay. I mean, I think that it seems to me like it's becoming a precedent in most cases, unless we, as a committee, see a reason to not allow it. I think that it makes sense to set it as precedent.
Well, so moved, Madam Chairman, to move it along. Yeah, I mean, that's what they need. That's what they need.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Should I make a motion, or can we just handle it informally?
Well, I'll make a motion.
Thank
Second.
you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Michael. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So is the motion that all contracts going forward include the possibility for a 6-month extension?
Just Wayfinders in this case.
Oh, just Wayfinders.
Just an understanding that as a precedent, we're sort of leaning into that.
Yeah, we're going to put it in this contract for Wayfinders. And I think we also decided that, unless there's some good reason not to do it, we will probably just include that routinely in future contracts. But we're not making a choice to always do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's move to hearing from Megan. Is it Sealer or Seller?
It's Siler.
Seiler, sorry. Oh, the one opportunity I didn't give you. So Megan Seiler and Bob Peirent are here to update us on the Wistariahurst project.
So if you wouldn't mind, there's really 4 things I'd like to touch on. First, the most important is to introduce Megan. Megan will give you her background, but she's effectively brand new to this project. So there are going to be things that I talk about tonight that Megan knows nothing about at this point. So she's, I think, here to listen as much as anything else. I would also like to update the committee on the project. I'd like to explain the project budget status because it's a little bit confusing. So I think it's worthy of an explanation. And then ultimately, I think we have a request going forward. So if I can pass it over to Megan for the intro, that'd be great.
Oh, so just a little bit about me. I'm from Detroit, Michigan originally. I did my undergrad in art history with a master's in liberal study, a concentration on applied history, and then did another master's in art history at the University of Kansas. Most recently, I worked for a private arts and culture firm where we establish museums around the world. We do that on a contract by contract basis. So I'm currently living in North Adams and very excited to be on board at Wistariahurst, and so wonderful to meet all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Madam Chairman, Megan, did you, are you on a, maybe I misheard you. Are you on a contract basis with Wisteria, or are you an employee?
No, that was my last position. We worked on contracts for museums around the world. So,
okay, but now you're an employee of Wistariahurst.
yes, I'm a full-time union member employee of the city.
Megan, Ms. Sealer, what is your title there?
Director.
Thank you.
So Megan is the new Kate. So what everything that Kate did, Megan's going to do and do. I don't want to say better, but because Kate did it very well as well. So
She did.
Kate's job is now Megan's job. So if I can get into the update, first I wanted to note that the work that this committee has funded, the design work of, has been successfully completed. We did receive our final inspection from the city electrical inspector last Friday. Everything is done, everything is in good condition. He was ready to sign off on it. That leads somewhat to an explanation. When this project was conceived, we had no real firm understanding of where the project was going to go because we had not completed any evaluations. We had not as-builted the existing facility. We had not designed anything at that point. So a firm was hired to first go through the entire facility, trace every circuit in the facility, as-built every electrical component to the facility, then evaluate it, and then develop a design for what we felt we could afford at that point. And what that work consisted of was, and Mike is familiar with some of these terms, but replacing what's known as the main feeders and the panel boards in the basement of the existing buildings at the museum, which is basically the backbone of the entire system. You really can't upgrade anything within the building until you upgrade everything that feeds the building itself. And they were some of the most antiquated components and most unsafe, both from a personal safety standpoint and quite honestly from a fire safety and facility safety standpoint. We had what's known as open bus boards in these panels where you would take the front of the panel off to replace a fuse, a cartridge fuse or a glass fuse or other forms of fuses, and everything was completely exposed. All the copper components of these panels were completely unprotected and available for anybody that might reach their hand into the electrical panel. So that was a major safety concern, and also major concern about really about the potential for arcing and short circuiting and things like that. So those panels were about 100 years old. They have all been replaced. All the conduits, all the feeders, all the backbone of the existing system in the basement of the museum is done and was done successfully. There were no change orders on the project. There were no issues on the project. So that's all the good news. The explanation is, as I indicated, when we started this project, we intentionally wrote the description to the CPC fairly broad to basically allow us to go as far as we could possibly go with the available budget. And there were words in the original scope that talked about rewiring, replacing old fixtures, making other electrical repairs, upgrading outlets, things like that. Things that need to be done, but couldn't be done until this backbone of the system had been upgraded and to be made safe, again, from a personnel standpoint, as well as from a fire safety standpoint. And that is now complete. The interesting thing, and I spent 30 plus years in the consulting business, so I'll explain this. Engineers are very nervous and very conservative anytime you touch old stuff. They're very good at designing new things. They're not necessarily very good at, well, they get very worried when you're touching an old facility because they imagine what might possibly go wrong. They even more so get very worried when you're touching not only an old facility, but an old facility that has formal national historical significance. As a result of that, is my understanding, is they developed cost estimates. They were extremely conservative with the cost estimates that were developed. We ultimately received bids that were a fraction of their estimate, about 25% of what their estimate was. Good news, but 25, 30%. Good news, the project came in way under what had been estimated and was done without, as I said, without any change orders. The contractor that did the work, United Electrical Company out of West Springfield, did an extremely good job. The man they had on site for the majority of the time, a gentleman named Aaron Brown. Aaron was their lead electrician, and he was a one-man show for much of this because it was just time-consuming, tedious work, wire by wire by wire, having to replace and change over systems. But again, it all got done and done successfully. What that means, though, is that we have an existing agreement with the CPC that had, I believe, a budget of $104,000, $5,000. We were actively seeking additional funding because we were scared based on the information that we received from the designer. I'll say they did a very good design, but they did a terrible cost estimate. And again, I'm sort of explained why they were extremely conservative in terms of the way they approached what it would cost to get this work done. What that means is that we're actually $81,000 under budget because a portion of the costs were funded by community development block grant funding. And we have not signed the additional request at this point because certainly to complete what was in front of us, we didn't need those monies. So there was no need to move that contract forward. That's the explanation. I expect you'll have questions, but then this leads into the request. The original scope, I think we're still well within in terms of being able to continue further in terms of making additional code-related upgrades to the facility in terms of providing additional capacity and outlets and lighting and things like that that were talked within the original scope. We certainly have funding in the budget to do that, but we're well beyond the contract period at this point. And that work won't happen quickly because now that we'd be working upstairs, everything we do has to be reviewed by the Mass Historical Commission before that work moves forward. The work downstairs, we received a sign off from Mass Historical Commission that they didn't consider any of the basement to be historic in nature. And therefore, good construction practices were all that needed to apply. Whereas once we go upstairs, anything that we touch has to be reviewed and approved before it's done. So realistically, to move into another phase of work to be covered under the existing grant, we're looking at months easily, if not more than that. But again, the good news is we're way under budget, but we would need significant time in order to move forward with that budget at this point.
Michael has a question. Mr. Filson.
Yeah, Bob. So in terms of what you'd like from this committee, if I'm understanding you correctly, you don't want more money, but you want to put an addendum onto the contract, or do you want a new contract to go with phase B, the second part of our story?
I don't think a phase B is needed because the original contract scope was intentionally broad. We're not going beyond what was envisioned might get done under this contract, but we need time is really what the amendment to the contract would be, probably in the range of 6 to 9 months right now. Everything is taking long. I learned today, for instance, a very small generator, a 20 kW generator at the fire station, as an example, is 22 weeks to obtain that piece of equipment. What we'd be looking at here, is relatively straightforward type of wiring and conduit and piping and things like that. So I don't expect long lead times, but the whole industry is slowing way down right now. And we have the added complication of Mass Historic having to get involved.
Right. Bob, it just brings up a point. Just a thought came to me. Is there a need for an emergency backup generator for the boiler, the heating system, or something that may be critical to the artwork or to the, just off the top of your head? It's just an observation that I had just moments ago, actually. Is it advisable to have a, maybe a small 100 amp or not, transfer switch and a small backup generator should they lose power, and to preserve the heat in case the wallpaper gets damaged or these kinds of things that may occur or may not occur. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a need for that, do you think, or?
It would certainly be prudent. There are probably a couple of different ways you could approach that. One would be, as you indicated, a relatively small generator on site to handle some of the key functions, not to run the entire facility, but basically keep the museum from freezing down in the middle of the wintertime and having piping freeze and burst and things like that.
Right.
It could be either done with a dedicated small generator or a manual transfer switch with an external generator, so you could bring in a unit in the event that you needed one. Certainly having one on site would be a more reliable approach to take.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think I would prefer to have it hardwired in and mounted somewhere with a concrete base, and even have an automatic transfer switch that would sense the loss of voltage, immediately go on. The boiler goes on, the hot water heater goes on, the fire alarm system stays on.
Right.
That would be, it's your job. I'm just a thought, that's all.
Sure. You're correct that function does not currently exist. So
yeah,
if there's an extended power outage, staff will have to respond and figure out a way to prevent the facility from being damaged.
Yeah, it's a good thought. The other thing, pardon me, Megan, just one more off the cuff, quite frankly, it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. The old equipment, Bob, have you ever think of donating it to the Hoyok Trade School for reflections on what was a wiring method back in the day?
The interesting thing is it has been retained by the museum. So they have that. And it was, you'll be interested in seeing some of this. One of the old panels, you might be familiar, some of the old panels would have a soapstone back to them because the soapstone was non-conductive.
Yeah.
One of them actually has a granite backing to it.
Yeah.
Multiple 100-pound panel that was taken out of the wall. And we had discussed it before we started this project that we wanted to preserve those types of features as part of the history of the museum.
Good idea. Good idea.
Cool.
All set, Madam Chairman.
Ms. Seeler, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that we're currently also waiting on a boiler replacement. And so that may also, I don't know, Bob, if you know anything about that, but if we're trying to do electrical work, is that something we can do if we have no boiler and no heat in the building? I don't know if that's something we can move forward with if we don't have a boiler to heat the building and keep everything safe.
Right. That's one of the balls that I'm juggling right now. We have retained a firm to provide a new boiler out of ISG Industrial Steel and Boiler, I believe is the firm.
Yeah.
You may be familiar with them, Mike. They are facing very long lead times. So we are actively in discussion with them of what types of temporary measures could be put in place, because the museum's boiler was failed by the state boiler inspector last year. So we have to have something in place that'll pass muster before wintertime. So we're working on it, and I was speaking with them today about the types of temporary type of work we could do in that existing boiler to avoid that problem of having to drain everything down and shut the museum down in the wintertime.
Okay.
So one of my questions, so I'm hearing that effectively there's a certain amount of funding left. Mr. Peirent, do you have a firm figure of how much is left?
I did my math a few minutes ago. I'm sure Amy's done it as well, so feel free to correct me, Amy, if I have it incorrect. I believe at this point, out of the $104,500 grant, we have spent $22,876, leaving a balance of $81,624.
Yeah, that sounds correct. Except I just have to look back at what the full grant was for, the amount. 104,500. Yeah, and it was 81,000 something that's left unused. And just to clarify for everyone, that project is, already, completed, as Bob was saying, and the deadline is passed. And now there's the new contract was on the table for 55,000. So if I'm understanding correctly, Bob, you're saying that you would need much more time than what was agreed on, but is the thought that you would still keep to the same scope, of work, and that amount of money is still appropriate, or are you not sure?
I hate to put it this way, but I will, because I think it's true. As much funding as we have available, we can put to use in terms of upgrading the electrical system at the museum at this point. Recognizing that we're way beyond schedule at this point, particularly if we extend this out another 6 or 9 months, minimally we'd be looking to retain the funding under the existing contract that has been signed. If the committee was willing to also extend the time period of the second contract, which hasn't been signed yet, that would be beneficial.
It's actually not possible. It's not this, the committee doesn't have the authority to extend the original contract, because those terms were what was approved by city council. And like we've already said, the deadline is long past. It was back in March. So I think that at this point you have to, either sign the new contract or readjust the terms on the new contract. But the new contract is the latest amount that was approved. And actually, well, I have to look back to see what city council said for that. But I don't think that you're locked in with the deadline for that. I would have to look back on it, though.
Okay. And I don't know exactly, much better than I do, what the city council approved. I was under the perception, and it may be wrong, that they improved the project, but not the specific contract language. But if they did, then I would agree with you that, we're bound by the contract.
Yeah, if we're talking about,
Council, Jamie.
Sorry, what?
Was the deadline of March 2021 for the first contract specific in the city council language?
Yeah, I believe, and that one was already what was signed for the contract itself. So you really can't, that would be breaking with the contract to continue to use funds for that contract that's already, way beyond its deadline. But for the new contract, I'm actually, I have to
pause there, Amy. I would love to hear Kathleen Degnan weigh in around if Bob Peirent wants to see this money from this contract still used, we're past the deadline. Is there any way for us to support that?
I think, obviously there's still the money that wasn't used, but I would just think that you just need a new contract, and but you would also have to have it approved by city council.
We might need to, Amy. I just want to hear from Kathy.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking to me.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, if I understand the situation, and I just want to reiterate it, that the original contract has been approved by city council. It was for 104,000. That's the grant money they were going to get. There's still 81,000 because it's been underspent. And now we're sitting here, we're looking at which I'm supposed to look at and have not, a second contract in the amount of 55,000. And that is for, I think, Bob, you said the scope of work had not changed. This new contract.
Correct. It was additional funding to help us complete the scope that was originally defined.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking whether or not to do an amendment or to simply do a new contract.
Yeah, I'm actually looking back at the terms for the first contract and, oh, actually, no, this is for the 55,000, not for the first one.
Okay.
And it doesn't have specific terms for that, but I don't know. It's the fact that the deadline was back in March, and I don't really see how you can, I really think you would have to have a new contract.
Well, I'd like to ask if there's a way to not though. So
No,
is
I
there a way
understand.
to have an addendum, Kathy, so we don't have to go through the entire process all over again.
One question I have, because the council's just approved the 104,000, right?
No, that was, yeah, but that was a while ago. Right. They also approved the 55,000, which is the one that a contract hasn't been signed yet.
Okay, so it's not a matter of having to get city council approval then. Just thinking out loud, ordinarily I'd say I'd like the second contract, but if it doesn't require city council approval because it's already been done, perhaps it could be an amendment. I'd like to look at it, before I say for certain, Meg.
Yeah.
But just basic what I'm hearing, I think it's possible. But without my reviewing the contract, please don't hold me on it yet.
Well, I would love to see if we can use an amendment process to be able to do it. Kip, can you want to just?
No, I was just going to say, let's focusing on the $104,500 contract. It could be amended to provide, extensions, but it would require city council approval of that amendment. I think that's the straight path, if that's the process.
That's why I'd like to look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to give legal opinions on something I haven't reviewed.
Right.
Yeah. And I see what you mean, Meg, that the fact is the funding was already approved. So that part was approved. That's true, even though.
And the scope of work isn't changing.
No, it's not.
Dates.
So I think we can, if you could review the contract, Kathy, and let's just see if there's a way to do an amendment and then move it to city council, Amy, as an order for them to review the amendment and approve it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll have to look back at the original document that was sent to them for that first contract, because it may have specified the deadlines. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. And then the next piece is just around the $55,000 contract. But Amy, you said that there was no specific dates mentioned in the city council language.
Right.
Which
But I
means
just have
that-
a question
Yeah.
about the first one. Are you saying that you want me to write something up? Or, well, I guess I'll look back at the documents for the first contract, and if it does include specific deadlines, are you saying you want me to send that to Mike Sullivan, that the committee wants to recommend? But I need to know the specifics of the terms you want to recommend. Yeah.
Kathy's going to review the contract and look at an addendum. I think the only thing we need to vote on here is to what extent are we extending it, by how much time.
Okay.
And so Kathy would work on that addendum if she thinks that she is in her legal purview to do so. And then whatever that addendum is, that's what would then be shared in an order to city council for their vote.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
So Michael, Mr. Pasoldi, do you want to speak? I do want to lock down what the time extension is that we're asking for here.
Yeah, no, that was, Madam Chairman, that was my question, just to review from Bob. Bob, are you looking for a year, 12 months, or 24 months, or what would you ideally like for us to do? I don't think there's any question. We'll agree to pretty much whatever you want.
Sure.
But is there 1 year, 18 months?
I would say at this point, a year would be very helpful. The prep work, the as-builting, the tracing circuits, all that work has gotten put out of the way. So the design piece of it is not extremely complicated. The mass historical piece of it will be time consuming, but I think a year would be sufficient to get through those steps so that we could not be back in the situation.
And this
Bob,
for both the $104,000 contract as well as the $55,000 contract. That would be September 30th, 2022.
Right. I think it would be our plan to develop a project that would encompass both of those, yes. If, again, if the committee agreed to it.
Do I hear a motion?
Well,
Or Kip, is there, you want to discuss more? You have more questions? Sorry, Kip, I think you're muted.
Sorry. So we have $81,000 left from the original $104,500 contract. And we have recommended, and the city council has funded an additional 55. So we're at $136,000-ish. You can spend that on the electrical?
With no problem at all,
Okay.
yes.
That
Yes.
was my question. I just want to make sure we weren't tying up more money than you were going to need for an extended period of time.
Right.
So I'll make a motion to extend dates on both of these things, contingent on approval of the legal department and the ability to amend that agreement.
a second,
Okay, and the date would be to September 30th, 2022.
correct.
Any further questions, discussion, or debate? Mr. Falsetti?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, Bob, given what I'm hearing from the Mass Historical Commission is that, I mean, they're in no hurry to do anything. Are you sure you've got, not that you guys, but I mean, the approval process from Boston, I'm hearing that they're not exactly fast.
Every day I do something new. This will be the first project that I do within a building on the National Historic Register. So to be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I would like to think a year would be plenty, but there's always a possibility that it could take longer. I do have a good working relationship with the chief architect at Mass Historical. It was the same gentleman I was dealing with on the stained glass window project. So he and I have a good working relationship, but again, I haven't done this part of work before, so we'll see. I'll learn once I get through this one.
Okay, no problem. All set.
Just if I can just, for the sake of the contract details that, Kathy and I will have to work on for, assuming this is okay to do we want to put a date like September 30th, 2022, or, given that we don't know when the contract will actually be completed, would it be better just to say 12 months from the time that the contract is executed?
Bob, do you?
What do you think?
Yeah, if there's a potential for the contract process to take an extensive amount of time, and I certainly understand, the situation Kathy is in right now. She has a lot of things that she's trying to catch up on as well. So if it looks like it may take some time, 12 months after approval would be a better way to approach it.
Yeah, good idea.
I like that. Okay. We have to vote on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, no, I am too, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, we're voting on, as Bob just described. Is that the motion? Okay, no, fine.
And so, was there a motion made? And did someone second that change?
Kip made the
Or
motion.
it's
I'll
part of,
second.
oh, okay, so it's part of Kip's original? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
My original motion was September 30th, 2022. So we need to just amend that to be 12 months from
The signing of the
execution
contract.
of amendment and contract. Both?
Approval
Okay.
of contract.
Yeah, so a motion needs to be made for the amendment of the motion, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I will make a motion to amend the motion to the language of 12 months from the execution of the contract.
Second,
All in favor of the motion to amend the motion?
aye.
Aye.
And all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Bob. Good job all around.
Thank you, and thanks for the support.
Of course.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move to, back to item 5, which we had moved out of order, to a place where CPC members can share external board priorities. So last meeting, I'd asked folks to go back to the circles that you are in, the boards or commissions that you serve on, and to check in, share some of what CPC's work has been, and then to come back and be willing to share a little bit about what you had heard back from your department or commission. So I'd love to hear if anyone was able to do that, and if you have anything that you'd like to share. Mary, did you say that you had been able to talk to the Conservation Commission?
Yes, I mean, so am I the only one that's here representing a separate committee tonight? I mean, a
Well-
separate commission? Well, anyway, okay, I do have information. So first of all, we do want to get through the Scotts Tower project. So that's number 1 priority. But also some other things include signage at Glue Tack Woods, and you know, just mapping that out and making sure, you know, we have trails and that kind of thing, but mostly signage. We also talked a little bit about the concept of some way of there being connectivity between all of the neighborhoods of Holyoke, either a bike trail or a walking trail, you know, that either is marked or mapped or something like that. So that was another thing. Also, the Conservation Department is presently engaged in an inventory of the city's trees. That was done, I think it was 5, maybe 10 years ago. At least what was required at that time was done. Now it needs to be updated, and it needs to be broader. So that is going to be a huge project. And that I think we're required to do under the Green Cities projects, Green Cities Act. So that's another project. Those are the items that I think are priorities for this year.
And
So
projects that Conservation Commission is imagining that might come forward for CPA funding? The
Well,
trail
each of the-
biotech or the tree inventory project?
each of those have some things that might require CPA funding. So obviously, you know, Scotts Tower does, the Glue Tack Woods signage does. You know, there's a need for, there was one other thing too, signage indicating the major streams and water bodies in Holyoke. You know, for example, if you're driving over something, the name of the stream. So all of that signage is going to require, you know, labor and funding. And the same thing with the trees inventory. There, you know, there's going to be a need for you know, some kind of documentation or publication. So each one of these has something that could potentially lead to something.
Yeah, questions for Mary, or any thoughts that folks have? I have a question around the Get Ready Holyoke project that occurred, and I was wondering if there had been any, you know, I know that was largely made with using a grant through the UMass Design School, but I've been wondering around, you know, I think actually it was Harvard University Graduate School of Design, and I've been sort of wondering if this is something that has been talked about by the Conservation Commission or Parks and Recs. Like, there were so many different projects that were sort of suggested within there that were around different ways for the community to interact with the river, different pathways, different bike paths. There was a number of different infrastructure projects that were suggested. And I don't know, you know, sometimes these documents exist, but do they go anywhere? And I was reading over it, wondering if any of those projects are ever going to be realized, or if they've been sort of talked about by Parks and Rec or by Conservation Commission.
Well, I've not heard of anything with that title, so where can we find that?
I can find the link and then I can share it out. But it was a series of projects that were put forward around the 2050 project around climate preparedness. So as soon as I find that, I can send it out because a number of the projects are really interesting. And I wondered if it was going to go anywhere.
Okay, well, I'll bring it up. And I would be surprised that Yoni doesn't already know about it. It's just, it hasn't been, or I have not tuned into that title. So if you could send me the link and, if there's a specific suggestion on a project in there, I would bet it probably fits with some of the things we already either are planning to do or have to do. So be happy to look at it and bring it up at Conservation Commission.
I also wondered about Scott's Tower. So now that it's sort of that parcel's been acquired, I think Yoni had mentioned when we met with him today that they were hoping to come back to us in future funding cycles. What were some of the things that they are starting to talk about concerning that?
Well, I'm sure the tower itself is going to need work. So, and I think that would probably be a big project. So that, I know there also is, originally at Scott's Tower, if you're at the tower and you're looking sort of behind it, on the original park, that was a field, an open playing field. And I think they wanted to do something with reopening that. A lot will come out of the, what we get from GZA for a design proposal. And then, we'll probably be back after that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or thoughts for Mary for Conservation Commission? Okay, and then is there anyone else that wants to share? Mimi from Planning Board or Kip or Michael?
Well, I'm afraid that Planning Board has been absolutely slammed for the past, I don't know how many months, and we're just digging out. So I haven't even had a chance to get it onto the agenda.
Okay.
I think this will probably change in the next few months if the lull, well, there may not even be a lull, but we will attempt to force it on to the agenda as soon as there's any break whatsoever.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you for that update. Anyone else? Okay, so folks that we didn't hear from today, hopefully we can hear from in the next meeting. If there's any priorities that you're sort of bringing to the table, whether specific to you or specific to groups and commissions and departments that you're connected to. Okay, thank you very much for sharing, Mary. That was really helpful. Okay, so the next agenda item is some quick an update on preservation restrictions and our thinking there. Amy and I have been speaking with Kathy from the city solicitor's office. Oh, did we lose Mary? Oh no, Mary's here. And we also had a chance to meet with Ben Murphy around the preservation restrictions, and we'd like to share a little bit of our current thinking as we're sort of going through the mire of that. Kathy, do you want to share what you were thinking?
Yeah. And I think what I talked about was the Jackson Chestnut Street. I see that on the list that Amy has given me, there are more like the 348 Chestnut and 337 Chestnut. Yeah, I'm sorry. The 348 Chestnut is historic, but the 337 Chestnut is housing. But I don't see from what Amy has nicely provided for me that there's any issues now that we know that we're talking about deed writers, because
I think you're
Yeah.
confusing because the deed rider relates to the affordable housing restriction that you
Yeah.
were talking about with Amy Giroux when you talked about Jackson Street. But now we're talking about historic preservation restrictions.
No, I was referring, there's another one on the list where you said 337 Chestnut, and it says
Yeah, that's
housing.
right. That's not a historic like you said,
Right.
that's not historic, so it
Right.
doesn't fall under the issue of
Right.
preservation.
Right. No, that's why I read it and I just saw the historic after I said it. But the 337 Chestnut, I'll look at the projects, the applications rather, because you nicely gave them to me to make sure that factually we're right on point. But from what Meg has said before, it looks like the majority of these restrictions, particularly with, affordable housing, that they're going to be sold. They're going to be properties being sold, not rented. So, I just want to go back now.
Yeah, I think that we're talking though about the issue of that we've had with certain historic applicants who were not comfortable with the historic preservation restriction. And if you don't mind my saying, Meg, I know that previously Jenna in the law department said that there's no conflict between the National Park Service and Mass Historic Commission, as some of them were saying, because the Mass Historic Commission approved rehabilitation plan can be included in the PR, and therefore that would be the document that everybody would be looking at. So there would not be a conflict between the Holyoke Historical Commission and the other, the historic credit authorities on any alterations they make.
Yes, and I think the other piece we talked about is that effectively, there are certain, applicants who come to us who are really familiar with restrictions, right? They're used to affordable restrictions, they're used to that process versus, we have some applicants like the Holyoke merry-go-round, which, is very wary of any amount of oversight, right? And they perceive the preservation restriction fearfully, right, as something that could be harnessed as a tool to kind of blunt their own autonomy. So one of the questions that this committee has gone back to again and again is this about a clawback? Is this about a preservation restriction? And what we talked about when we met, Kathy and Amy and I, is this idea that there just may be a cap that we want to set,
Yeah.
right? Where underneath a certain amount of funding or with a certain simplicity of project that we're just not expecting a preservation requirement. Where, for example, the $90,000 that we spent on the Ray Street building for the facade, Amy, that required a preservation restriction, yes?
I'm sorry, which one?
Yes.
Right?
Which
The $90,000 that was approved by City Council for the Ray Street project.
Yeah, that would require, because it's a private business. Yeah.
That required a preservation restriction. We have not considered it for, of course, city-owned projects, only for privately owned properties. Didn't, expect it for the fire truck because it was not expected because it is not a building. Because it's a truck, right? But then of course we have this applicant, the carousel, who's not willing to sign the contract if a preservation restriction will be required. And it's sort of
a question. I'm
Yes,
sorry, Meg. I'm sorry. I just want to be clear. I'm looking in terms of agenda items. I'm looking at item number 6. Have we?
7.
Okay, so it's 7. All right. So I'm sorry. I was on the wrong item, and I see discussion of preservation restrictions. And yes, I remember the discussion that you're talking about. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Other than with the merry-go-round, I know that that's problematic because we talked about that. And I know with respect to 348 Chestnut, we did talk about that with respect to a potential conflict, which I think what has been discussed and what we were planning on doing, it makes sense to put the plan in. And I don't recall why, Amy, we don't know why that is still an issue, do we? The historic
Why, which one is an issue? Sorry.
The 348 Chestnut, the historic preservation restriction that you were talking about. You were talking about that one, weren't you?
I think we're talking more generally about how some applicants are, yeah, I don't know that that particular recipient is having a problem. That might be the one, they might be the one people, I'm not sure, but they might be the one project that signed off on it. I have to look back. I think they got the draft. I don't know if they've signed it. So, but I think we're speaking more generally about, you know, what to require. I think the committee is thinking about that. So.
I did look at the claw. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kathy.
I did look because you did give me an example of a clawback, which I thought was good. Obviously, it's going to have to be tweaked, but in terms of substance and adding more stuff, you know, I think that that would be a tool that we could use. But we did talk about, as Meg said, limits. You know, should we have? Is there a certain amount of money we should be talking about? I think we discussed that. No, it's something, there isn't one, but it's a good thing to discuss at this level. Maybe it's a case by case kind of thing. Does that sound familiar, Meg?
Yeah, I think what we discussed was maybe it makes sense as a committee to vote on. Of course, we can take it case by case, but I think that the fear there is that we then just look like we're playing favorites with where we expect it and don't. So if it makes sense instead to name a monetary cap, where if you have a project that's under 40 grand, we would not expect a preservation restriction at all. And I think that it could be, you know, a one-time piece, or we could make it sort of a lifetime cap. Like I will say for the carousel, for example, like it's a $26,000 project. Doesn't seem, it's not as large a, you know, an award amount as some projects that we've worked with, right? But I don't think that carousel will never come back to us, right? It may be that they're back asking for another $26,000 in another year or another year. So I don't know if it makes sense to name it just as an overall cap for a single project, or almost like a lifetime cap based on our recipient coming back multiple times. So I'd love to hear what people think about this idea of setting a financial amount under which we would not expect a PR, and if we would want that to be project by project, or whether we would want it really to be at a sort of lifetime amount per applicant who may return to us. What do we think?
I mean, do you want a policy vote? Are you looking for a policy right now to vote on a policy? Is that is that the object of this?
I think the object is, we've been dancing around PRs and clawbacks for a really long time, right? And I know we've expected it in the Chestnut Street project, we've expected it in the Ray Street project, but both were for a much higher amount of money, right, than the current carousel project, which is $26,000, and they're very firmly not comfortable signing the preservation restriction. I may think that that is overblown. In fact, I do think it's overblown. I don't think they have anything to fear. I don't think there's no mechanism in there that provides, you know, for us to ask them to approve every change through us that they make, or right. But I think there is that fear, right? But it also it's a wordy process, right? You have to go through the process of creating a PR restriction. You might have to have legal counsel, effectively have to review it, which is a financial burden. So for a project that is not, for a certain amount of money, I'm wondering if we want to set just a cap under which we would not expect a PR.
Are there other authorities that would be part of any decision-making when something is a historic building or a historic thing? Like the merry-go-round. Is there some other authority out there beyond us? In other words, do they have to always comply with the Massachusetts Historic Commission, rules for any kind of improvement?
Yes, it's implied. Mary, excuse me, Madam Chairman. Mary, all of us, regardless, we all have, when we get money from the state, there's going to be restrictions or you don't get the money. You get money from Washington, There's going to be conditions and restrictions, or you don't get the money. So it's not like whether it be the merry-go-round or any other project, there are restrictions inherent in the contract that you agreed to when you signed for the Massachusetts Historic Commission grant, and you got it. But there are conditions. So, Mary, I think this is taking way too mumeg time.
And I think we should put a monetary ceiling on the amount, saying, like you said, Meg, say 40,000 and below, we're not going to add some kind of a caveat.
I just wanted to answer your question, Mary. It was something a point I was making a moment ago, that what we learned is that if they include a Mass Historic Commission approved rehabilitation plan with the preservation restriction, as they're required to do anyway, there should not be a conflict between what we're requiring and what MHC or any historic tax credit authority is requiring, because it's all based on the rehab plan.
Well, and in this case, the carousel at least perceives itself to not be underneath any jurisdiction or registration.
They are, Madam Chairman, they are. The state of Massachusetts, when they gave them the grant and they gave them the land, yes, they are under restrictions. I mean, do you think they just gave them the money and said, spend it as you will? They are under restrictions. We're under restrictions. This committee is under restrictions.
That may be the case. Their perception is just that doesn't, they don't feel, they're afraid, for example, of the PR because they think that it would be used in this way, right? Which it frankly wouldn't, right? But I still think, especially from the financial perspective, of having to obtain legal counsel to review a PR, that it does make sense in any case. Like, I'm not making this based purely on the carousel is my point. Right? Like, I think there's going to be a lot of other cases. This policy, by the way, if we move forward with it, would have applied to the canal building. This was our first applicant who withdrew based on the fact that we were going to require a PR and they didn't feel comfortable with it, right? So it's that type of project that would not have to have a PR. The 43, flats, a 43 canal building in the flats, the carousel project.
Meg, could I suggest something?
Mhm.
Because there's different types of restrictions. Chapter 184, which I'm sure you're familiar with, 184, sections 31, 32, and 33, talk about restrictions. And maybe if you would like to move to send a request for a legal opinion, so I can address, there's more than one statute at play here is what I'm trying to get at. And I don't know if that's anything you want to do. It's just a suggestion. If that would help everyone in this committee, I'd be willing to write an opinion so I can flesh out all the issues, because I see more than one.
I would find that helpful.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So that would mean tabling it at this point to the next meeting until we can get that from Kathy.
And I think, it also gives us all a little more time to think through the policy and where we're going, which may make for a better focused discussion next time.
Okay, that sounds good to me. We need to go back. Actually, I took one item out of order. We did not discuss 6B, which was review of the Jackson Street contract. And we do need to vote on that tonight. Or did we already vote on it? My goodness. It is getting very late.
Yeah, you haven't voted to approve it. And this, if I can, you don't mind my interjecting.
I do know that we need to vote on it tonight.
That was the main reason Amy Giroux was in this meeting, was because they are they really have to get started. They have a tight deadline and they want to get that contract. They have already approved it on their end. But it was tabled in the past because the restriction wasn't yet done. But of course, Kathy's going to be working on that. But if this contract were signed, they could move forward with their deadline and not be delayed.
Okay, so what needs to be done still with that contract on our end? The CPC?
You just need to vote to approve it, and then you can sign it, Meg, as chair.
Okay. Remind me again why we didn't vote on this last.
Because Kim
wasn't on the agenda.
Yeah, Kip, you were chair then, and you decided to table it until the restriction was done.
Okay,
But
and the
that's
restriction
no
is
longer
now
present.
done.
The restriction is not done because it's Kathy's working on that.
Oh, that's true. Okay. So does it make sense, however, to approve the contract pending the restriction, given the issue that they're having with starting construction?
I don't know what you mean by
So I
pending.
will say that, like, the tenor of the emails that we've been receiving have been intense, right? Where they really need to start
Right.
with construction, and at this point are not able to because the contract has not been executed.
Exactly, and the contract itself says that they will sign an affordable housing restriction, and we heard from Amy Giroux today that they've done this before many times with the other departments in the city. So I don't have any reason to think they won't sign an affordable housing restriction.
Yeah, they won't. Madam Chairman, with the contracts in front of us, they need to get it signed. We're holding them up. I
Agreed.
make a motion, we approve the contract.
I second. Any discussion or debate? Okay, all in favor?
I,
I,
Aye. Mimi, is that an aye or an abstaining? An
that
aye.
was an I.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the last piece here is looking at updates on projects brought forward to City Council for their approval. So the MIFA Murals is still, has it made its way through DGR yet? Amy, do you know?
No, the next meeting, city council meeting is September 29th. So that's when it's on the agenda.
Okay. And then the small grants for fiscal year 22 was approved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And then just other, so there's just a few, basic housekeeping and pieces and announcements we wanted to make. So the CPA Coalition is currently anticipating the match to be at least 35% of collections, which is high, which is nice. So, that will, once we have that, right, we'll work with Andrew McCon to make sure that we have an understanding of what that means for our budget. But that's exciting. And Amy, do you have a few other pieces that you wanted to mention around the CPA Coalition?
Okay, yeah, just that I sent you all, and I think you automatically get the CPA Coalition emails that they're doing a boot camp on CPA, which would be a great refresher and also just good for like new people like Mary to perhaps register for. I've already registered for it. It's on September 28th at 12. However, they're also going to have an evening one, which I don't think they've announced if that's more convenient for people. And I suggested that Stuart record it so that people can also watch it on their own time. So it's kind of like a shorter version of a training that some of you who were originally on this committee when it first formed participated in. So that's a good thing to be aware of.
Okay,
yeah, so I signed up for it.
awesome.
Great.
And I think Kathy has as well, which is great. So the next piece is just that the new grant cycle eligibility forms start next month. So one of the conversations that I had with Amy is just around this idea of like, I mean, this meeting was a killer. Man, I don't know how anyone else felt about it, but holy heck, can we just get through all these contracts? Like the legalese is wild. So, I mean, there's this massive backlog. Right. Like this meeting was a slog. At least it was for me. I don't know if it was for anyone else. Right. So I think our hope is that we're making our way through the backlog of things that have just been waiting for months, right? Basically untouched or in pieces. So the goal is to get through that backlog. And, there was some initial concern around like, can we launch the next eligibility cycle given that backlog? But I mean, at least my hope is that, it is September, right? And usually we're not voting on projects until February. So that gives several months for the legal department or the city solicitor's office to sort of, mine its way through everything that needs to be done so that we're in a good place to kind of have a fresh slate and be ready to go to execute contracts in a more timely manner in February. To June of next year.
Madam, what, is October 1st the opening bell for eligibility applications?
Amy, what's
October
the exact date in October for eligibility forms?
When is it due, or when will it go out?
When is it open? When is the official
I'll be
starting date?
posting it in the 1st of October,
Oh,
and I can
all right.
also send you one.
If you please send me one, I would.
Yeah,
appreciate
you already
it.
told me. I'm going to send you a copy. Yeah,
And when is it due for eligibility forms, Amy?
the end of the month. I'll give all that specific information. You know, the last business day of the month. You know, by 4 p.m. I think that I can tell you if you want to know the exact date. But it's on the timeline, which is on the website. That's October 29th, 4 p.m.
Okay, awesome. And then the last piece is just us naming our next meeting date. Okay, so we normally meet the second Wednesday of each month, which would mean the 13th. I'm actually not sure that week if I'm going to be in town on the 13th. So I was wondering if it might be possible to meet on the 20th. Is that a date that works for folks?
No problem. Works for me. I don't
Works
know
for
about
me.
anybody else.
Yep.
All right, wonderful.
Good.
Okay, so October 20th at 6 o'clock. Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Anything else before we adjourn? Yep.
Is it implied that all from now until a new mayor, that all meetings will be Zoomed as opposed to live?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and we'll keep following back up with the mayor's office. But when we, you know, so far, I don't think any subcommittees have been meeting in person, although Mimi, did you have some for the planning board?
We have had a couple of optional, you can come in for the meeting or you can Zoom in sessions. We haven't had any completely live. And I don't think a majority on any occasion has taken up the offer to meet in person.
And in those cases, are members of the public also able to go and speak in person and participate in person?
You know, I don't know, because so far it hasn't really come up. Everybody who's wanted to join, well, that's not true. We have the occasional joint public hearing with the City Council Ordinance Committee, and we have had people come in person to speak to us in City Council chambers. So far, we have not had a split session where people were in the fourth floor conference room and people were Zooming in, where anybody was interested in coming live to present anything to us. We have had public participation via Zoom. And I assume that if anybody for any reason had wanted to come and address us in person, they would have been invited, but no one has shown up that way.
And so when you are doing these meetings in a hybrid setting, you know, half the committee is in the room and half the committee is on Zoom and everyone's on their computers together?
It's complicated. They're doing, the City Hall Annex and Holyoke Public Media and the entire team have done a brilliant job of making the technology work. So, the City Council can see the big screen of the planning board members who are in the fourth floor conference room. We can see each other, everybody can talk, but it is not ideal. It is easier, I think, to do it one way or the other.
I mean, I found that with education last year, and we went back hybrid. It was easier on Zoom or in person versus in a hybrid model.
Exactly.
Not that we couldn't do it, and not that there aren't benefits of it. And I'd be happy to put that on the agenda if folks want us to explore it and more conversation in the next meeting. I don't know if we would be able to move fully in person or if it would be to a hybrid setting. So I think that would definitely need to be part of the conversation if we wanted to have that.
Yeah, and especially as the winter closes in and we need to have windows closed and such. I think to me at least, it would be good to know where Delta variant and booster shots and all the rest of it were before we made a final call.
Well, we're also under a mask mandate, and for me, it's awkward being on camera where the public can see me, but I'm wearing a mask and maybe my voice is muffled and they can't hear me as well.
That too.
Mask mandate. Well, I'm not following you.
I thought Holyoke had gone back into an indoor mask mandate,
So if
City
we meet in
Hall?
person, yeah,
which means that if we met in person, we'd all have to be masked, but on camera. So that to me raises its own issues, right? Around like,
No, it does. Madam Chairman, maybe we should just wait for the new mayor. Let him decide. I don't know.
all right. Anything else that anyone wants to mention before we adjourn? Okay, thank you for going through the slog of all of the details and all the contracts. Kathy, thank you so much for
yeah,
coming.
thank you.
And for all the work that you are doing. I deeply appreciate you.
No,
On behalf of the CPC.
we'll get through these. I understand the issues, so we'll get through these. But thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Let's have a motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn.
in a second. Lisa?
Second,
All right, it's official.
Have a
Okay.
good night.
Thank you.
good night.
Take
Good
care
night.
now.